Chelsea Tornetto with At Home Author, and today we're going to talk about the power of last lines in picture books. Before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more great information about how to publish for kids. Every author wants to make sure that the last line of their story really leaves readers feeling satisfied. Whether it's a happy ending or not, they want the reader to leave with a sense of, that was a good story. Maybe I'll recommend it to a friend, or maybe I'll read book 2 in the series. Last lines are important, but with picture books, they are extra important because our goal with a picture book is for that young reader sitting on the lap of mom or dad to say, can we read it again? That's the hallmark of a great picture book, right? That's the dream of every author is you want, someone to say, oh, my grandchild asked for this every single night. Or, a mom to say, oh, I've read this book probably 100 times. My kid likes it so much. Those are the hugest compliments that you can get as a picture book writer. And a lot of that is due to how we end that book and what we leave our reader feeling at the end. So as picture book writers, everybody should be asking themselves, how do I give my book rereadability? How do I make that ending so good that the reader wants to turn to the front and start over again? So we're going to talk about a few ways that you can end a picture book that will leave your reader wanting to read your story one more time. So the first way is pretty obvious, but that is to leave your reader with a strong emotion at the end of the story. So if you can end your story with a scene that the child who's sitting on someone's lap or who's sitting in bed wrapped in their blanket ends with this feeling of security, with this feeling of love, you're probably going to get them to have a positive association between your book and that feeling and want to read it again the next night. A really great example of this type of ending for a picture book is The Wonderful Things You Will Be by Emily Winfield Martin. It's this beautiful lyrical picture book written in rhyme that talks about a parent imagining what the baby is going to be whenever they grow up. There's beautiful illustrations. It has a very kind of soft bedtime feel. And then the last line, when you get to the last line, says, and I'll love you whoever you've grown up to be. And so it has this really great emotion at the end of reassuring the child that they're safe, that they're loved no matter what, no matter who they are. And so that is a great way and very powerful way to end a picture book. Another way that you can get the reader to want to reread your story is to end where you began. So this is sometimes called a circular structure, but basically where the main character ends up where they started. Or maybe there's a second character who is poised to make the same mistake that our main character made at the beginning of the book. So some sense that this cycle of whatever happened in the story is going to happen again. Sometimes it can have a humorous twist to it at the end. That often makes the reader kind of giggle and then say, okay, let's read it again. So a perfect example of this type of ending is If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, the classic book by Lara Numeroff. And so I'm sure you're all familiar with this, but basically it starts off with, if you give a mouse a cookie, he's going to want a glass of milk to go with it. And it proceeds, if he has that, he's going to want this. If he has that, he's going to want this, all throughout. And of course, by the time you get to the end, he wants another cookie. And it definitely gives you the sense that the whole story is going to start over again, which is a great way to get the child to want to reread the book. Another great way to make your book rereadable is to utilize a repeated refrain as the last line of the story. Often it can be the title of the story as well. This is especially effective because if the line that you're repeating is at the end of the story and it's also the title, it is natural for the reader to want to flip to the front cover and see that that is indeed the title. There are many books that do this, that have a repeated refrain that is the title, that is also the last line, and that naturally kind of leads the reader back to the beginning. But my book is a perfect example, so I'll go ahead and use that here. It's called Gardens Are for Growing, and it is a lyrical rhyming picture book about a little girl who grows up with her dad in their backyard garden, sort of a parallel story about the garden growing along with the little girl. And in the very last line, she grows up and brings a grandbaby back. And the last line is where gardens are for growing. And so it naturally sort of leads you back to the beginning. Another excellent way to give your book rereadability is to end with something that's going to make the child laugh. Humor is powerful, especially with kids. And so, if there is some sort of humorous scene at the end that leaves them giggling, they are highly likely to want to read your story again. So, a wonderful example of a good humorous ending in a picture book is the book Bloop by Tara Lazar. It is this silly story about an alien who comes to Earth, or is sent to Earth on a mission, and obviously he looks like an adorable little dog, and he is taken in by a family, or he infiltrates a family, and eventually decides that he loves where he's at and he's going to stay and live with his human family. And that's the ending basically, and you think it's this sweet emotional moment, but when you turn the page, he then says that he has one more mission to protect his home from alien invaders, and there's a cat that of course kind of looks like he could be an alien too. And so kids giggle instantly because, we all know the traditional conflict between dogs and cats, and the whole book is funny. But ending with that extra little laugh at the end is a great way to end a picture book. One of the most powerful ways to really get your reader at the end to have that feeling of satisfaction is to throw a plot twist at them at the very end. Something unexpected, something that they didn't quite see coming. If you can do that, surprising them at the end of the story is going to make them impressed and want to read it all over again. There are lots of picture books that have sort of a plot twist at the end, but my kids always really liked Pinkalicious. And so I'm going to use that one as an example. So if you've not read Pinkalicious, it's just a story about a little girl who only wants to eat pink cupcakes and pink foods. And she eventually turns pink because that's all she's eaten. And it's hilarious, humorous story about that. And in the end, she finally um, learns her lesson and has to eat a bunch of green food in order to fix herself and turn herself back to her normal color. But on the very, very last page, or the last couple pages, the dad in the story says, "So, what happened to all those pink cupcakes that we had left over?" And you turn to the very last page, and her little brother, who has been sort of a minor character in the story up until that point, says "Pinkaboo," and he is now pink like she had been. His skin is all pink. And so it's sort of a plot twist that you don't see coming, and it also sort of gives you that hint that maybe this is going to start over again. Now we're starting the same conflict again. So Pinkalicious is a great example of that. And kind of connected with that, sometimes the twist or the humor at the end, so both of those that we mentioned, humor and a twist, a plot twist at the end, sometimes you don't even have to have that in the text itself. Sometimes there can just be sort of a final illustration on the very last page that indicates or hints that something is about to happen that's funny or humorous, or that something unexpected is about to happen. So, a great example of a picture book where the illustrations sort of end the story on their own is Little Red Reading Hood by Lucy Rowland and Ben Mantle. It has this wonderful story about Little Red Reading Hood going through the woods to the library, and she meets the wolf, and the wolf is his stereotypical self. But by going to the library, the wolf learns that he can end his story however he wants. He doesn't have to be the bad guy. He can rewrite the story to end however he would like it to end. And so the story itself ends, the text is done at the end of the book. But when you turn to the very last pages, there is simply a spread with lots of little vignettes of the wolf basically hanging out with three little pigs and like reading them stories and taking them on trips and sort of being friends with them. And so it's a perfect example of how a really cute illustration at the end can give the reader a peek at more of the story, or hint that, of what was going to happen next without actually having text on the page. And that's just another example of why it's important to give our illustrators some leeway and some agency in the books that we create, because maybe the illustrator can come up with something to add to the end of that book to give it that rereadability that we're trying for. If you would like to read any of the books that I mentioned as examples in this video, I'm going to put links in the description below to YouTube read alouds for all of them. They're all available on YouTube. Most children's books are, guys. If you ever want to find a book to read as a mentor text, definitely search the title on YouTube with read aloud after it, and you're very likely to be able to find it. But I am linking all of these for you in case you would like to see the whole story. I hope this video was helpful. Next time you're ending a picture book, try utilizing some of these last line ideas so that your reader will want to read your story again and again.